Well, welcome to another edition of Unplugged, and it is finally all over, unfortunately. We've sort of flirted with the prospects of staying alive in the finals race and battling for one of those spots in the lower half of the eight. And to the club's credit, they've looked down and out at times this year, but they were still alive right through the end. And it did end with a fight. They were certainly competitive against a very good Geelong side. They set the game up early for what should have been a real match-winning opportunity, and it was. They were a point down with 3 minutes to go in the game, and just unfortunately couldn't quite do enough. There's an element of disappointment in that, but in saying that, it's a long way from their worst loss for the year, and it's a long way from being as bad as the loss against that same Geelong side earlier on in the season. Clearly, the injury to Max King, who was dominating early, hampered their chances after quarter time. 46 inside 50s to 32 against. If you've only got 32 entries, you are going to struggle. But it was probably just a case that the Cats had a few guys that handled the moments in the big moments, like Cameron and Dangerfield towards the end. But a creditable effort, but at the same time enough to be a little bit frustrated about that it sort of slipped away. And that kind of summed up the season, where we gave ourselves a chance, but we were just consistently not good enough to take it. We battle on to Fremantle, a game that will be played in Hobart, of all places. We've played Fremantle in Tasmania before, and nothing of note particularly happened in those games, so probably don't even have to touch on them too much. But we get them in Hobart this time. But Nick, it was a very, very small, and it hurt, but there was a very, very small element of relief almost when it finished, thinking that this has been a nightmare, and at least we're out of our misery.
Yeah, it was really kind of mixed feelings in those few minutes, I guess, leading into and then after the final siren, because there was a part of me that was really disappointed about the result, because I thought we played well enough in parts, and like we had against Geelong earlier in the year, that we kind of showed that we can compete at the level, and then to fall away in moments and just give up the ball so easily in terms of winning the hard ball, and there was a period in, I think it was the last probably 3 to 5 minutes of the first quarter, and then the first 10 minutes of the second quarter, where I think they won 8 or 10 clearances straight, and we just could not get our hands on the ball in the middle. And it was kind of like you wonder had Max King, like you said, not aggravated that adductor, if he hadn't gone off, because he was so dominant in those first 10 or 15 minutes. If Max King doesn't go off and we win a couple more clearances in the middle, and he kicks another one or two, is the game almost out of reach at that point? We were playing such good footy for those first 20 minutes of the game that it looked like, this was a St Kilda team that turned up, that had shown they were ready to play. They want to win for the first time in 6 weeks. This is a team that wants to win that final spot, and they're going to throw everything at them. And ultimately, for whatever reason, it wasn't enough, like you said. But I think, like you said, that at the siren, and all of a sudden you're going, oh, it's over now. I don't have to worry about it. I have to think about that, that 10% chance that we can play finals, that little shot, that little light that's still burning at the end of the tunnel, that maybe we can do it again, that kind of miracle finals run, and go on for an extra couple of weeks. But it wasn't to be, and there was an element of relief at that moment, thinking about not having to worry about it for any more time. But pretty disappointing as a whole.
Yeah, I think it was, and H will probably touch on that. It will touch on the season as a whole over coming weeks, but it did allow us that point to reflect on what is probably a waste, I would say, this season.
I mean, saying it's all over and that sort of stuff, but I keep seeing statisticians telling us we've still got 1% chance of making it. I mean,
I think it's less than 1%.
We're going to win by 30 goals, and Collingwood by 30 goals. That's not too much. So, just not there this season. I mean, the fact is we've lost a few games that we shouldn't have lost, and that's why we're out. Those crucial games which you should win, they're the games that get you into the finals, and just costly wins that you sort of look back and going, that if we deserve to be in, if we'd won those. But you don't deserve to probably make it when you lose to Adelaide how we did. How just those sort of results where we've turned over great leads and just fallen into a hole. So it's looking back at the game on the weekend. It was probably a lot closer than what like it felt a lot closer than what it is when you look at some of the stats of the game. I only did midweek. I think I looked at it and went, "Hang on, we had 104 less possessions at them."
It's
I did
fairly
not
normal in
think
Geelong
of.
games though, but it doesn't look
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
no, I thought the game was much closer than that before I looked
yeah.
at it, and I thought Marshall probably halved the ruck contest, but he got absolutely smashed. Just these things. I was thinking, going,
Mm.
hang on, we might have done a little bit better than what I actually thought we did, to be honest. So it's it's yeah, just it's all up. It's a bit disappointing, as we say,
It's
but we've got to come back next year and win those matches that we didn't win.
Yeah, I
it's
guess.
a good
Yeah,
it's a good point. Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, and like you mentioned, Parker, we'll do I guess a deeper dive into the season as a whole probably next week. But and all the listeners will be saying, well, why didn't you talk about so and so, and why didn't you talk about this player, and
we will.
whatever. We'll do that. We'll
Yeah,
do that next week. But you mentioned a good point, H, about winning those games that you should win, and you look back at the fixture, and there were so many games. Let's put aside the Mammoth losses, the Essendon game, the Bulldogs game, etc. But there were so many games that we were in a position to win and threw it away in the second half or in the last quarter, or just couldn't hold on for whatever reason, or just couldn't kick that last goal to seal it, or just couldn't kick that goal to put us in front in the end. And that happened so many times this year. And you think about the position we were at kind of mid-year, and it felt like we'd been walloped so many times, and we had, to get to the point where we're still in finals contention in round 22, and potentially still fighting out for a final spot. It feels like the year has been a lot worse than it has. And you look back at the ladder 10 years from now and you'll think, oh, St Kilda finished 10th or 12th, whatever it ends up being. It doesn't look horrible. It's not wooden spoon like we've become used to as Saints fans, but we were closer in so many games than it actually feels like at this point in time.
yeah. It's been probably the hardest work of many seasons that I can remember. 2017 was a little bit that way, where we lost a couple of really costly games, Port Adelaide and West Coast and those sorts of games, and that felt like a bit of a labour like this. 2011 was a bit that way, even though we made the finals, but that was a bit hard given where we come from. But just on that, we probably played, I'm not counting the Collingwood game in this because we genuinely flogged them in that game. We just tightened up at the end, but we weren't going to lose. But we played 9 games that would have been in the balance in the second half, and we won 3 and lost 6. So you got the Giants game, both the West Coast games, both the Geelong games, Sydney, Adelaide, Port Adelaide and Gold Coast. So we beat the Giants, we beat the Gold Coast, and we beat West Coast the first time when we came from 6 goals down, and that was still up for grabs late. But the West Coast loss recently, the Sydney loss the first time, the Adelaide loss, both Geelong losses, and certainly the Port Adelaide loss, which I think was our worst of the season in terms of missed opportunities of all of them. So, and that's it. I mean, if you get 9 games in the balance, you win 3 and you lose 6, then you're probably going to miss the finals. And that's what's happened, unfortunately. We just needed to win 2 more of them, go 5 and 4. And that would have been enough. Clearly, the Adelaide game was the most winnable, in that we were in front with 48 seconds to go or something. But it's also
you could see
probably
that.
the
You could
worst.
see that happening a mile away, though.
You could, like, we were just sitting ducks. Like, it was just, you were just waiting for the kill shot, really. But yeah, and that's why the season has been frustrating. It's why I call it a waste, really. Like, I mean, we've had I could probably count 4 of the wins this year have been some of the most enjoyable wins I've ever known. Like the Giants win in round 1 was a belter. The come from behind win over West Coast, the Richmond win at the MCG, the Brisbane win at Metricon. I haven't enjoyed home and away wins like that in a while. And you sit there and think you can play like that and produce highs like that, but waste the year and miss the finals, like, it just shouldn't happen, really.
Even the footy we played in that first half against Geelong, in the first game.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for kicking for goal, like, we played some sublime football that night.
And there are times where I look at us and think whether we're up to it or not, but there are times where I look at it and I'm like, well, there's no way we should have missed the 8th. No way. And that's where it's I guess that's where it's frustrating.
Yeah, I think you look at what we did last year, and then kind of those fluctuations and the variation between our very best and our very worst is so big. And when you've got that type of difference from your best to your worst, like you say, you're probably not going to play finals. But I think we've shown over the course of 2 seasons that our best football is good enough to match it with anybody, regardless of whether it's Richmond, West Coast in Perth, Geelong here, Geelong there, Sydney in Sydney. It almost doesn't matter. Port Adelaide in Adelaide. Our best football can match it with anybody. But
we have an issue though on that in the tight finishes. I mentioned 3 and 6 this year, but you look at last year too. Even though we made the finals, we should have wrapped up that final spot 4 weeks before the end.
Agreed.
So the North lost, the Freo lost, the Melbourne lost, the Brisbane lost, the West Coast lost. We nearly lost the elimination final from nowhere. So we've got to address what's happening in those tight games, because if something like that happens that often, then you've got a bit of an issue. So I would say in the last 2 years, we're probably 5 and 10 in games that are in the balance.
Sounds about right. And I think it speaks to issues with potentially leadership on the ground, maybe some coaching and tactics in those moments and set plays and that sort of stuff. But yeah, there's clearly some issues that need to be addressed in that regard, H.
Yeah, it's going to say it'd probably be something that wouldn't mind having a look at what the conversion rate is from leading games at half time to actually winning them, or even from 3/4 time. Because it's been something that it has haunted us for a couple of years now. And I mean, I even remember going back 15, 20 years ago. It was a problem back then too. So it something that it's stuck around, and it can happen to us a bit often. So just I don't know if it's a mental thing or it's just something that I don't know. Do we not get the rev up these other teams are getting at half time? That we just like, oh no, yep, we've done the job. We just got to go back out there and make sure we hold on to the win, or how they, I guess, attack that second half when we're winning a match. It'd just be interesting to know what it is that how they look at the game at that point. Do they say, "Oh, we're winning, just keep going what we're doing," or we've got to go out there like it's scores are level? It'd be interesting to see what the mindset is at that point.
And the frustrating part was obviously round 1, severely depleted, came from behind, won a close game. You look like you've ticked all the boxes. You're like great resilience, strength against a side that ended up having a pretty good year. That was a really nice performance without either ruckman. And then every time we were confronted with the same scenario, we sort of buggered it up. And it wasn't always the same way. I mean, we lost to Geelong and Sydney because we didn't kick straight. We lost to Adelaide because we completely stopped and got overrun. We lost to Port Adelaide because, again, we got right back into the game and then made 3 or 4 really bad mistakes at both ends of the grounds. The West Coast game we weren't too bad in. We're probably just a bit undermanned in that one. And I'm trying to think what the recent Geelong loss was probably the other one. And yeah, that was probably neither of those things. We kicked okay. We just probably just got slightly outgunned late with some of the better players on the ground, and probably injuries didn't help us. So it's not always the same way that we lose. But I'd hate to think what our record is, even in the last 7 years, leading games after half time. Even to some degree, like games where you've been in front by less than 10 points after half time. I wonder how many of those we actually hang on and win. It wouldn't be many, unfortunately. And as a result, we're going to have to watch a final series, which I'm kind of sick of doing, but we'll see. But yeah, it was, I guess some of it, I mean, Sharman's kicked 2 goals, 1 for the 3rd week in a row, but he was quite important again and will have to be this week. It was interesting your point on Marshall H. I agree. I was sort of watching the game and didn't notice that he was getting a bit of a touch-up. It was only sort of late that I'm like, yeah, he hasn't been that good today. It sort of took me a while to realise what was sort of going on there, and frustrating that it was Reece Stanley, who's nowhere near as good as Marshall, doing it to him. So, but yeah, there was enough positives, I thought, to come out of it. Some disappointing ones. Brad Hill was average. He'd been all right of late, but was average. I thought our small forwards, Higgins had been in good form, but he only had 8 or 9 touches, and Butler struggled. So we just didn't have enough. I mean, if you looked at it and said, and we kicked, 10 or 11 goals for the game, and Sharman King and Membry contributed 7 of those, and King on one leg. We just didn't get enough. 4 goals out of the rest of the group. 2 of them from Crouch. Yeah, nowhere near enough from other contributors, sadly.
Yeah, I think it feels like everything sort of broke down when King went off. He was the focal point, and he was winning his position, and that was making everything just roll smoothly. Then all of a sudden he's down, everything gets reshuffled, and it just all collapsed. And you sort of think, well, if he'd played out the game, we'd probably be telling a different story.
Probably.
The way he was playing,
Mm.
there was no way Henry was going to be beating him. That he was going to kick a bag on him. It had it written all over it, and there was nothing he could do to stop him. It was as simple as that. Henry had no way to stop him. The only way that they were doing anything down there was you'd see that in the background, another Geelong defender would be coming down and blocking him, like sort of moving him out of the way. And it was only then when our other small forwards were sort of a bit like, hey, let's get down there and help and actually try to get these players away from him. That was working as well. So we were counteracting anything they threw at him. So him falling out of the game, it's probably one of the biggest losses we've had for the year when you look back at it.
Yeah. I completely agree. And like we said before, I mean, he was dominant in those first 10 or 15 minutes, and there was nothing that he couldn't mark. He was kicking the ball beautifully. But just on King, because I doubt we'll see him this week. You don't think?
No, he's ruled out. He's out.
They risked him this week. So, has there been a better key forward in the second half of this season than Max King? I mean, we know that the flack that he copped in the first half, but I mean, Harry Mackay's going to win the Coleman you'd expect. But he was ostensibly better in the first half of the season and has missed a few games in the second half. I can't think of someone who has clearly been a better key forward than Max King since about round 12 or 13.
No, not in the second half of the year, because, I mean, obviously Cameron's been out injured and Hawkins hasn't been super in his absence. But he's been in and out. Melbourne's forward setup's been a bit all over the place. I know Larkey kicked 7 in a game, but that was about it.
It was against Carlton.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. So, no, I think he's been excellent. And, that's one of the positives to take out of it, is what it looks like for him. And even that free kick that they gave away to him in the third quarter when he couldn't move just struck of them being spooked a bit by his presence. And in the end, I don't know, he was only on one leg, but that was a pretty big miss. If we had a kick that, we would have gone 10 points up with 3 goals in 2 minutes. But, I was hoping that maybe he could have almost sort of said, well, I can't take the kick, I'll go off now. And then one of those little crafty around the body players like Butler or Higgins could have had that shot and slotted it through. But, he's been terrific, and it's hard to say. And the pleasing thing is that his best 6 games have come against good teams. West Coast, Geelong, Brisbane, those sorts of matchups, Sydney. He's played his best footy in those games, which is encouraging.
He seemed to have broken apart some of the, I guess, better defensive teams when you sort of look at who he's taking all these contested marks against. Yes, they were missing Stewart, but he's not really going to be that player that's stopping King. No,
that's right.
His marks are picking off kicks when the big forwards aren't there. So,
Harris Andrews, Jacob
McGovern,
McGovern, Vlosten, and
all these big
defensive
names.
Unit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not that he can't play against them. We know that for sure. And he's only going to get stronger. He's only going to, I guess, get better hands. He's going to give some forwards some backman nightmares in the years come.
Oh, he is. We'll look towards Freo, who we haven't played since that Metricon nightmare of last year. We've probably played 35 games since we last met them. But we'll be joined by Dean Rice shortly. And as we said, we'll do a full post-mortem. We already know at the time of recording this that Jake Carlisle won't be offered a new contract, that Sean McKernan has retired, that there's still speculation around the future of Ross, Dunstan and Billings. Frawley's another one up in the air, Geary up in the air, those sorts of things. So that's all that we'll deal with that once the final ball has been kicked next week. So there's a shitload of stuff that we can get through in that regard. But the votes, I thought it was in the end, unfortunately, a bit easier than we would have hoped. I thought Dougal Howard was okay. I thought his comeback was good. I thought he was struggling before he went out of the side. So I thought that was a pleasing enough return, even though the Geelong key forwards were okay. I thought that a couple of guys like Jones gave us a bit of run and carry, but I gave a vote to Sinclair for his superior ball use to everybody else on the grounds. I gave 2 votes to Brad Crouch. I thought he really lifted us after half-time, 24 touches and 2 goals, important goals too. And Jack Steele, even though he had 21 in the first half and 9 in the second, he was still our best player, our most consistent player over the course of the game. Should have got a free kick just before three-quarter time when Geelong kicked that goal to hit the front, when Tom Hawkins just beelined him and put his knee straight through him. Also, he got cleaned up a couple of times by Dangerfield and should have got free kicks for that as well. But in the end, he was still our best player. And I think if he lays 8 tackles on the weekend, he's got the most tackles ever recorded by a player in a season. So probably deserves that honour. H, where did you sort of see it?
Well, he deserves a week off, to be honest, but
He's not getting one.
Yeah, very, very, well, almost the same as what you've gone with. Probably an apology to Max King for no votes. I mean, if he plays the entire game, that's a 2-3 vote game. He keeps on that same track that he was on before he went off. So, yeah, that was a game he deserved to pick up some votes, I think. But yeah, unfortunately, you only play about half a game, you're not going to get him. I actually went 1 for Crouch, as for every reason you've just said there. And yeah, it gave us a bit, and yeah, he popped up at the forward line, kicked 2 goals, and he did his job. 2 to Sinclair. I saw how much we missed him the other week. That the gap he left a couple of weeks ago, when you look at it and they go, the job that he's doing, the role he is playing, the way he uses the football, he's got to be our best field kick in the team by far. He just has poise. He just has. It feels like he has time to decide. Okay, yep, that's who I'm kicking it to, and he kicks it and he hits the target. The position he has made himself and basically forced Rats to play him there. He has made his position and made himself basically unable to be removed from our best 22. From the best 18 even. He is not going to be dropped anytime soon if he keeps on that same path. I mean, he was on that path a few years ago, dropped off a bit, but he's definitely found that again, and he is going to be one of the keys to us coming back next year and being competitive again. So, yeah, really hope to see him get up and get plenty more votes next year. And yeah, 3 Jack Steele. It's simply in the book, and that's as easy as I can say. There's nothing else to add to it.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I've given, I guess, apologies to both Max King and Brad Crouch, but for the reasons that you've both given. I think the impact that Max King had in his time on the field was immense, and if he hadn't been injured, I think the potential for us to win that game is incredibly high, or at least a lot of the game to go differently. Crouch, again, a really workmanlike effort. Was strong in the middle and gave us something, especially in that third quarter. I thought when we were struggling to get back into the game, he kept working hard. But I gave 1 vote to Tim Membry. He didn't have a lot of the ball; it's only 10 or 11 touches, but 6 score involvements and 3 goals was really handy for us up forward and gave us a really strong target, especially when King was off or hampered at least. But he also had 2 intercepts across half back when things were not going our way, and his ability when he's on, and he's got a really good footy IQ. I think Tim Membry, he doesn't always strike you as the smartest bloke out in the field, but I think the way that he reads the game and understands how things are going when he's on, and he's understanding kind of how the ball's moving and where it's going. His ability to drift back and impact across halfback in contested situations has been really important for us in moments this year. And there was a 3 or 4 week period kind of in the second half of this year where he just kind of lost that a little bit and he wasn't doing it as much. And I think that really impacted our ability to rebound when opposition got on a run. And I think that he was kind of back to his best in that regard this game. So I gave him 1 vote. I gave 2 votes, I think probably for the first time all year, 2 votes to Jack Steele. I thought his first half was elite. And then at halftime, they obviously put some work into him, and not to discredit Steele. I think he worked as hard as he always does, and still ended up with 30 touches, 5 marks, 5 tackles, and nearly a dozen clearances, 10 clearances, or whatever it was. So, another amazing effort from Jack Steele, who just has elevated himself into the top echelon of midfielders in the competition. And this is his award, as we know, it's the Jack Steele MVP award. But 3 votes to Jack Sinclair. I think, like you said, H, is kind of really lifted his game to where he is in our top 2 or 3 players most weeks, and he's in our top 2 or 3 players on the list at the moment. You mentioned a couple of years ago, I think he was St Kilda's only player rated elite by Champion Data, and I think we all kind of went, hang on, what's going on here? This doesn't really make sense. He had a good year, but it wasn't necessarily a great year, but he's had a great year this year. Mm-hmm. I think what is changed about his game is that he's not purely an outside player anymore. We know he's a halfback flanker, he's a wingman ostensibly, but he also wins a bit of contested ball. He puts his head over the ball. He hits the contest hard. He's bulked up. He's stronger and more powerful, but his ball use is amazing. He impacts all different parts of the ground, whether it's off halfback, whether it's through the middle. We saw some of those kicks into forward 50 on the weekend. Just sublime skills, and I don't think we've got anyone else on the list that can kick the ball around the field like he can at the moment. And he just looks like he's floating on air the way that he covers the ground. And had 20 touches at 83%, 6 marks, 6 score involvements, and 7 intercepts across halfback as well. I just thought he was our most influential player across all 4 quarters, and was nearly in the second half the driving factor to us getting close.
Yeah, absolutely. The Shannon Knoll, I guess, one of those for the year. A guy that should be as good a kick, I thought about giving it to him. Brad Hill, just for a couple of lazy touches, but I think he's been all right in the last or second half of the year since going to halfback. He was poor on the weekend, but overall, I think he's been okay. I gave it to Butler last week and could easily have done it again. There was nothing that came out of that to change that situation. But we're going to give it to Seb Ross, actually. I've been one of his bigger defenders, and I think he's been a very good player for us. It is conceivable that this is the last time he'll ever play for us. That's a possibility, certainly. I kind of hope that's not the case, to be honest. But, I know a lot of people disagree with that, but I just think I made the observation when we beat Sydney that he looked a yard off the pace of everyone else. We were playing a really slick, sharp brand of footy, and he looked like the guy that wasn't quite at the same level, like he was playing a slightly different game. And certainly against Geelong, I thought that was the case again when it was pretty hot at stages in the game. He was caught a few times. He mistimed a couple of bounces, a couple of poor handballs at players' feet, and he's a better player than that. And I think, if he does go out here, it's unfortunate. He certainly deserves a better finish than that. And I hope he does put his hand up and say, look, this is still the place I want to be. And I'll be BOG this weekend to sort of prove that point. So, Nick Sevros gets mine.
Yeah, interesting call. And I think he's kind of been around that mark over the last probably month, I guess. But, I found it really hard this week because there were a few guys. You mentioned Hill, and I thought over the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks, Brad Hill's been pretty good. We know that he has, 1 or 2 brain farts every game, and he lowers the eyes, and he goes for little 10 or 15 metre dinky dunk kicks that generally miss a target and give up a goal. But I thought in general he's been pretty good. This is probably his worst game for a while. But I found it really hard to go past Dan Butler this week. When the chips are down and you need some forward pressure, we know that in the second half we found it really tough moving the ball forward and getting those inside 50s. You touched on some of those numbers earlier, Parko. But when we did get it in there, it almost came out just as quickly. And, you kind of rely on guys like Butler and Higgins to put some of that pressure on. And I feel like he just lost that. And we know that he hasn't had his best year. We know that offensively he hasn't had his best year by a long way. But we do know that at the very least, he's been putting some pressure on, especially I think in the second half of this season. Mm-hmm. He's been better in that regard. But this week he had 2 tackles for the game. Yeah. He had 0 goal assists. He had 9 touches and 7 of them were uncontested. I just thought that his work rate and effort, all those kind of energy things, and and impact and pressure rating and all that sort of stuff that you need from him in tough games and hard games, especially when it's a bit of a slog and you lose some players with injury. Yeah, I just thought that he didn't give it his best shot, and he gets my Shannon Knoll this week.
And it might be a little harsh because he's been one of our keys this year. I mean, we sort of look back at this year and go where did we win most of our games, and it was our ruck department. But yeah, the way Rowan was beaten on the weekend by what's his name? Sorry,
Stanley.
He's the way he's been beaten by him on the weekend, where he's basically their third string ruckman when you look at it, and Rowan's should be getting up to the point where he's number one for us, taking over the reins from Paddy when he decides to move on. So I don't know if there was a little bit of injury or something niggling him getting towards the end of the season or something, but yeah, he definitely wasn't on it. And as I said, it was even worse when I looked at the stats after and thought, hang on, it wasn't that bad, was it? So
he didn't seem to cover the ground as well as we've used to him. And even being outpointed, I think Stanley took that kind of contested mark in the top of the golf square or whatever it was. And it's just really unusual for Marshall to get outpointed in that type of contest, especially by... I mean, he's a far, far superior player to Reece Stanley. But you're right, H. I think Stanley just got him.
Unfortunately, we took the risk of playing the one ruckman, and that's the risk you take. I guess you hope that one ruckman dominates for you, but if he doesn't, then you can be in a bit of trouble. And unfortunately, we saw the week before when he destroyed Hickey. It just didn't quite go that way for us, unfortunately. But we'll hear now from a guy that a very good career with the Saints, kicked some tremendous goals, gave some great run and carry before finishing off winning a flag with Carlton. But he did leave a legacy with his son coming back to join our club not long after his career finished. And I speak of Dean Rice.
McAdam will look for Rice. Rice has got enormous pace. He should get to this mark. He does so and steadies and will go back and take his kick.
Rice has kicked 3. Nearly his best haul in his league career. This to break the deadlock. Good effort. A goal. His kick to half forward. Rice again. Well done.
We've seen a couple of great marks today, and that was fantastic there by Dean Rice. A tremendous quarter.
Well, Dean Rice is our latest guest on Unplugged. Plenty of players that we've spoken to on this podcast or across the journey have made the transition from Carlton to St Kilda, but there are only a handful that went the other way. Certainly in the 80s, it was famous for St Kilda picking up a lot of ex-Carlton players, but the likes of Dean Rice and Matthew Lappin moved on from St Kilda and had successful careers at Carlton as well. But he played 234 games and basically 50-50, 116 with the Saints and 118 with the Blues, which included a premiership in 1995, was a part of a St Kilda team that charged to the finals in 91. Dean Rice, thank you very much for your time.
No worries, guys.
Now, your journey started at a very similar time at St Kilda to a lot of great players. Your first year was 87 in terms of playing senior footy. That would be Nathan Burke's first year, Stuart Lowe's second year. Robert Harvey would debut the year after. Nicky Winmar started at the club. Plugger would win at Brownlow. Exciting time to come to the club, obviously with a club legend in Darryl Baldock at the helm as well.
Yeah, no, it was a long time ago. It's hard to get the memories up. But, yeah, no, it was. It was a time when I guess in St Kilda years prior were struggling. I think they won a lot of wooden spoons in a row, and I know that at the time I went there, they were pretty desperate for some success, and they brought Darryl Baldock over from Tasmania to try and get that success. And, the coming years they recruited pretty well. And I actually remember the first game. Nicky Winmar played the same first game for us. It was round 1, 1987, so a long time ago.
Dean, what was your youth footy like growing up? Because your uncle played and captained Geelong.
Yeah.
And so you had kind of VFL footy was in your blood. Were you a Geelong fan growing up? And what was that pathway like for you getting to St Kilda?
No, I actually barracked for St Kilda as a kid. So my grandfather on my mum's side was a big St Kilda fan, and he got me barracking for St Kilda when I was young. A lot of my junior footy with my school, because I went to Salesian College in Chadstone. I started my juniors at a club called Essex Heights, which used to be a link to Richmond, because that was Richmond's zone back in those days. But my teenage years, I played on my junior footy with the school. From there, I played 1 year of senior footy as a 16-year-old with my brother up at Longwood in the Benalla and District Football League. My brother was in the army, and he coached them and convinced my dad at the time, because I was doing my HSC, to go up there and play that year with Longwood, and we actually won the premiership. From there, I went down to Geelong because of those links with my uncle to play 1 year in under-19s and reserves in 1986, and live with Gary Hocking in those days down in Geelong, which was interesting days. We got to do a bit of mischief down there, and they decided at the end of that year to try and split us up and let me go and kept Gary Hocking, and I ended up going to St Kilda in 87.
So, being a St Kilda fan, did you get to many games at Moorabbin growing up? And then how was that transition going from being into stands to going out in the field and going, oh, hey, I'm out of here now? How was that feeling from there?
Yeah, my dad was a journalist. So my dad actually worked for the Sporting Globe and the Sunday Press and all those papers in the old days. And so he covered football. He's a football journalist. So I used to go to the football with him wherever he went, and he'd get the odd St Kilda game, which was at Moorabbin. And he was a little bit concerned at times because he had to be in the press box, and didn't like leaving me out my own at St Kilda, that's for sure. And I remember the day, even though St Kilda, from when I was growing up, weren't that successful. So I remember the Trevor Barkers and those sort of players who were playing before I joined St Kilda. And when I did join St Kilda, it was definitely a highlight to actually even train with those sort of guys when I barracked from.
Yes, as you say, St Kilda had won 4 wooden spoons in a row. You've come in, you played 20 games in your first year, including 18 in a row to finish the season. St Kilda won 5 in a row and got on a great run late that year, a run they hadn't gone on for a while. There are plenty of great highlights at Moorabbin historically, but Plugger kicking his 100th goal in 87 would have certainly been one of them, and you were on the ground playing in that game against Footscray. Can you sort of take us through what that was like? The club had a bit of momentum at Moorabbin, and Plugger's obviously going ballistic that day.
Yeah, the memory I have of that day, obviously, it was I think it was a pretty good game, so it was pretty close all day, and we ended up winning the game. But Plugger kicking his 100th goal, and I remember standing out in the ground. That's when people come streaming onto the ground. I remember one of the Footscray supporters bumped a few of us on the way past just to try and get us fired up a bit. I remember that when they actually ran out, but it was pretty spectacular to be on the ground when someone actually kicks their 100th goal in an AFL game. So it's definitely a highlight of my career watching that.
We know the parties sort of happened down there in Moorabbin a fair bit during the 80s and that sort of thing, and then Plugger goes and wins the Brownlow. How did Moorabbin go after that, or was it not? Did nothing really happen down there afterwards, or did you see a few interesting things happening with celebrations?
Not specifically with Plugger winning the Brownlow, because we didn't play finals, so a lot of the guys dispersed when the Brownlow was on, so they'd be travelling all over the place. But I remember when you win games down at Moorabbin in those early days, that and probably a cultural thing, and probably hampered us in the end, that you win a game, it was like winning a premiership. So you go up to such a club after the game, and if you're one of the better players that would get a vote, they'd get you up on the stage in front of the crowd and announce you. And it was like trying to you couldn't get in. You had to go around the back because it was just so packed after a win, and they'd be celebrating all day all night, all Sunday, all Monday. And by the time the game come around, we're sort of, we're still celebrating the game that we won, previously.
Just on Plugger, I guess. I mean, you were a pretty kind of powerful wingman. I remember you kind of streaming up and down the wing, but you would have kicked a fair few, I guess, goal assists to the big boy in the goal square. What was he like to play with?
Yeah, well, he was probably the most influential player that I ever played footy with. He was the sort of player that could win a game of football, and you don't really have those players anymore. Where it's more of a team thing. Where back in those days, you just put it up the Plugger, and you count on Plugger kicking 10, 12 every week. It's funny you actually mentioned that because I got two younger boys. I got three boys. Two of them are still pretty young. They're 10 and 13, and they pulled out the videos the other week on YouTube, and we were watching some of them. And I was commenting to them that Plugger kicked over 1,000 goals, and the amount of times I kicked him, I reckon I helped him with about 500 of them.
There was I was actually watching a game on YouTube earlier today from 91 against Brisbane. I think he kicked 5 points that day. Plugger kicked 10 goals. But 91, so you only missed 5 games over about 5 years. You were basically instantly established in that best 22. The side gradually built, and when Ken Sheldon took over, they showed some promise in 1990. But 91, you played a fair bit of footy forward early in the year. Obviously, when Plugger was out, you kicked 5 in round 1 against Richmond. That transition, you sort of played a pretty important role. I think it was you, Russell Morris, and Stuart Lowe that sort of carried the forward line in Plugger's absence.
Yeah, I can't remember why Plugger wasn't playing, but he was either...
He's back in a practice game against West Coast at Waverley.
Did he? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so my role changed from the wing to go forward. And I think I was changing on the ball too at the time with Danny Craven. Yeah, so that year, predominantly that's the way I played. And then I think Plugger came back on the side in the later rounds, sort of 8 or 9 or something like that. And I think I probably kicked 20, 30 goals that year. Probably one of the years that I kicked my most goals in my whole career. So yeah, it was an interesting time, especially without Plugger, but when Plugger come back, it was just sort of get out of the way and let Plugger do all the work.
As Darren said, I guess by then you'd kind of established yourself as a really key member of the team, and that kind of happened straight away. Did you envisage that happening so quickly? Because I think it was by 89, 90, you were kind of already in state, in rep team conversation and playing for Victoria. So how did you see that transition from you being a young kid to all of a sudden being a, maybe not a walk-up start, but really being a key member of the senior squad?
Yeah, just back in those days, you're playing the game because you love it and you're passionate about it, and you want team success, and you never really thought about yourself all that much. You just went out and did the job, and you believed in what you could do, and I guess that's confidence in yourself and your abilities, and you never really think about, should I be here or shouldn't I be here? You're just there doing a job, and hopefully your team has success.
Sheldon was the coach around about that time of another St Kilda Carlton crossover there, and had a little bit of a run-in with another St Kilda Carlton crossover in Craig Davenport at one point. Did you have any situations where he sort of pulled you over and had a bit of a chat or a bit of motivation, I guess, to then go out and do something that turned the game, or just gave, I guess, a bit of a motive?
Yeah, I had a few run-ins with Kenny. Kenny was interesting. He obviously got the best out of players, or most players anyway. He had an interesting way of going about it. It was always going to be tough for Kenny because he transitioned from a player to a coach straight away. So a lot of players that he was coaching were actually players he played with. And I think to get players respect, I think he went at times over the top. And in the end was one of the catalysts why I left St Kilda.
You say that he's one of the catalysts of why he left St Kilda, but what was that period like? What was the change from, I guess, that late 80s to the 91 season when all of a sudden things started to fall into place and come together, and all of a sudden for the first time in donkey's years we're playing finals footy? What was the change?
I guess we had a pretty talented side. There were some players that played around that era to become legends of the footy club. But to Ken's credit too, you've got to take your hat off to him that he really challenged the players and he pushed the players, and he probably didn't find that happy medium where you challenge players and you push them, but at the same time you've got to get their respect and get to understand them too, who they are, because everyone's not the same. And I think he just pushed them a bit too far, and I guess that's why in the end when he had a lot of success for St Kilda, which hadn't much success, to the next year being sacked as a coach, because I think he lost the players by the way he went about it.
He played 105 games in 5 years and then played 11 in the next 3, obviously as a result of significant injuries. Can you sort of take us through that end of 91 into 92 and obviously how that came, unfortunately, unstuck physically?
Yeah, so to the start of 92, in a pre-season game against Geelong and against the guy that I used to live with, Gary Hocking, he went to smother the ball and come across my knee, and so I did my knee at the start of 92, so I missed the whole of 92 and then came back in 93. I probably didn't come back in the show. No, I worked pretty hard. It was always tough because I never ever, as you mentioned a few times, I played 105 games straight for St Kilda and hadn't missed much footy, and then to miss a whole year and to get back to play in 93, it was always challenging to get to the right shape. And then 93 come around, I was in and out of the side. And then, I had a bit of running with Kenny and on the training track, which, was unfortunate, and it didn't turn out too well for me. And we had a few words, and after that, I never played a senior game for St Kilda again.
So was your mind made up at that point? I mean, Ken Sheldon would be sacked at the end of that very season. So was there any time for you to almost sort of say, well, he's gone, so I might stay? Or was it all made up well and truly before that point, and there was no going back?
Once Kenny moved on, I was pretty committed to the club. Stan took over. Stan was actually the fitness coach for St Kilda prior to him getting the senior job. So he worked under Ken for a couple of years, so he knew the circumstances and what happened with Ken. And I remember at the start of 94 pre-season, it was the end of my contract, and St Kilda wouldn't sign me up. I guess they had some concerns about my knee, and 93 wasn't a fantastic year. And I said to them, well, if you're not going to sign me on a contract, how do you expect me to do a pre-season? And, if I get injured, I'm not covered or anything like that. And so I stood out of training for a couple of weeks, and my manager at the time ended up getting to sign an injury indemnity form, which is obviously not around anymore. But that just covered me from if I did get injured, that I'd be covered under a contract of some shape or form. And unfortunately, the start of 94 in a pre-season game when Stan was coaching, I got injured in a practice match down at Warrnambool at Koroit against Essendon, and I hurt my good knee in an accident. At the time, it was pretty upsetting, and I thought I'd be gone again for the whole year. I thought I did my other knee, but I got the news that I'd only be out for 6 to 8 weeks, and I guess St Kilda in the end and Stan, used that as a reason to tell me that we no longer wanted you anymore and we're letting you go.
I guess before we touch on I guess, your time at Carlton and how that panned out. It'd probably be remiss of us not to talk on the 91 final series. I mean, like we said before, it's kind of the first time in forever that the Saints had played finals. And I mean, for you as a St Kilda supporter growing up, what was that experience like? And I guess specifically, I'd like to hear your memories of that 91 elimination final against Geelong.
Yeah, no, it was massive. I remember the training session leading up to it. Like, there would have been a couple of thousand people at training watching. St Kilda had been starved success, so there was a lot of buzz, a lot of enthusiasm around the club. We had a fairly successful year. I think we finished 4th out of 6 teams, and the system that was set up back in those days was 3rd played 4th, and the loser went straight out. But the winner was a huge carrot because they got to play in the second semi the next week. So it was all nothing. And I remember running out at Waverley, and it was a packed crowd, and St Kilda hadn't played in too many packed crowds. So it was electric. It was exciting, and we were 5 goals up at half time and looking like we were going to beat Geelong, and in the end it didn't quite happen. I remember with about 2 or 3 minutes to go that I had the last shot for goal. I was running into in front of an open goal. I actually missed, put us 7 points down. If I kicked it, we would have been 2 points down with 2 or 3 minutes to go. So that sticks with me I'll keep bringing that up a few times. But it was unfortunate because if we'd beaten Geelong at that, we would have played in the second semi against Hawthorn, and we'd beaten Hawthorn earlier in the year. And, you sort of have woods over teams. You play well against teams, and, Geelong we hadn't beaten, and Hawthorn we had. So, you look back on now, if we won that game, we probably would have gone close to playing in a grand final or even going close to winning it. So, with the players that we had in our team.
Yeah, it's a good point. It was the worst final system probably ever created, that final 6, and it only lasted a few years. But you're a little hard on yourself. I remember the shot. You say open goal. You were 51 metres out. So a little harsh. But H, you're up.
I was going to also say we had I think a bit of the wood over the West Coast at that point as well. So that was it would have been nice to have come up against them too.
Yeah.
But your time at the club, is there anyone you would say that you sort of gravitated to and they had a fair influence on the time you were at the club, and you sort of looked at and went, yeah, I want to sort of stick to them and take everything off them I can?
Yeah. Not necessarily that, that I thought, I was going to follow. I was pretty blasé about the way I went. I just played. I never really thought. I just thought, that I belonged. As I said, you have your self-confidence. But, the players that you were close to, I was pretty close with Dean Gregg. I remember Lawrence Bingham at the time. I was pretty close with Plugger because I grew up. I didn't grow up, but I was living in Dever Hills at the time with my partner at that time. And I remember Plugger was living in Dever Meadows or Cranbourne, and we used to travel to training together all the time and travel to games. When we played in the state, we'd drive to the airport. So he had a big influence on me too. And but there's no one I really actually looked at him and thought, I need to be like that type of player.
So 94, we don't talk about Carlton too much on the pod, but we'll touch on them a little bit. But obviously 94, you're at Carlton, you do the knee again. Take us through that, and then obviously returning in 95 and winning a flag. I guess that full circle where I guess you're probably facing career mortality when you do a knee for the second time, and then you can come back and win a premiership. Can you, I guess, take us through that resolution?
Yeah. So I ended up leaving St Kilda start of 94. Back in those days, they had a pre-season draft, which was held in the end of February and March. So for all of those delisted players that did get delisted, had an opportunity to be drafted into into another club, and I was picked up by Carlton. I ended up playing my first game for Carlton. I can't remember, round 5 or round 6 against Richmond at the MCG. I was going all right at the time. Again, someone fell across my knee, and I knew straight away that I did it, because I experienced it before. And I remember sitting on the bench. It was just before half time, thinking, "Yeah, that's it. It's all over. 2 knees. Not too many people to come back from 2 knees back in those days." But Carlton were fantastic to me, and David Parker. And I remember he came out to me and said, "Look, you're going to get every opportunity to get yourself up." Lucky I was playing right at the time. I think that helped me to survive and give me an opportunity. And that was all the motivation I needed, was that someone would believe in me and give me that opportunity, because I'd been through it 2 years prior. I knew exactly what I needed to do and what I should do and what I shouldn't do, and got myself pretty fit, and ended up playing the premiership in '95, which you look back thinking all the injuries that you had, 92 and 94, and that probably led you to and opened the door for winning a premiership in '95. So there's always a positive out of a negative.
I guess outside of the obvious in winning a flag at Carlton, but what were the major differences that you found at Carlton compared to your previous time at St Kilda?
Yeah, I guess it was just culture. We talked earlier about St Kilda, and you win a game and you'd be celebrating for a while. Whereas at Carlton, I remember it sticks in my mind how the different cultures was. The start of '94 when I first came to the club, it was in March, and they held a jumper presentation at the end of March to all the players. And I remember John Elliott getting up in front of the whole club, big crowd, all their sponsors, all their supporters, and just lambasting the whole club about finishing second the year prior when they got beaten by Essendon in '93, and just telling everyone that second's not good enough. If you're not up to it, we'll let you go. We'll get people that want to be around the club and want to play. And I was just thinking at the time that if St Kilda had finished second, they'd probably celebrate that for the next 10 years, not get up in front and just say to the club that's not good enough. And that was the difference between a winning culture and what the culture that St Kilda had. And I guess to a point, Carlton's probably lost that now over the years, where they've their culture is not the same as it was back then. But that was the difference in those days between Carlton and St Kilda.
Go forward a few years, and your son's coming up for draft.
Yeah.
He had the choice between both Carlton and St Kilda, and it was sort of no one knew which way he was going to go with. Did you have much influence over where he decided to go, or you just basically said to him, "Nope, your decision, you can completely take whatever you want," or did he come to you for any advice of what he should do?
Yeah, we talked about it. Mine, because he's a Carlton supporter as a kid, obviously, because that's all he remembers. I was at Carlton when he was born, and my impression was that he was always going to Carlton. He did a father and son program at Carlton, but St Kilda, to their credit at the time, with Alan Richardson and Tony Elshaw, who was the recruiting guy, they did a fantastic effort in convincing Barley that St Kilda was the club to go to, because they were always there. They looked after him. They got him to do work experience at the club. Alan Richardson would offer Barley that, because Barley was playing TSC at the time with the Stingrays, that come in, we'll have a look at your video and we'll go through it. And, they sold a great package to Barley, and whereas Carlton were always interested, and Sauce was the recruiting guy at the time, and I had a relationship with Sauce, and I think in the end it was Barley's decision. I remember him ringing me from the draft camp and just saying, "I've made my decision." I thought, well, hang on, mate, we really haven't talked about it. And he decided then that St Kilda was the club, and he felt comfortable there. It was closer to home. If he had to go to Carlton, he probably would have had to leave home and live with someone or be in a house or whatever it was. Whereas at St Kilda, it was just down the road. It wasn't too far away, and you could go there, and that's why he chose St Kilda.
So Bailey spent a couple of years at the club and is now over in the States playing a different type of football. Can you tell us about his time in the States and what he's up to now?
Yeah, he left in 2019. He was pretty disillusioned with footy at the time. And there were a number of reasons for that, and I won't go into too much about that. But Bailey decided to go down the line. He always had a passion for American sports. He'd been over to America a few times as 14, 15, 16-year-old before the AFL. Then when he was going away with a few Saints players, he'd go to America with them, and just decided that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go and punt and get into a university. He had a relationship with Aaron Sipos, the ex-St Kilda player, who was at Auburn University. When he went over with Rowan Marshall on a footy trip, he stayed with Aaron Sipos for a week there and experienced what their lifestyle was and what Aaron was doing, and decided that's what he wanted to do. And he joined up with a company called the Punt Factory. The coach of that program, I actually coached as a player when I was coaching local footy after I left AFL. So I had a relationship. He's actually, the talent manager for the Oakley Chargers too at the same time, Jai Bond. So he went down that ride, did a 6 months program with them, and then to Bailey's credit, he worked pretty hard and got a full scholarship to North Carolina University in America, and he went over the start of this year in January, and he's been there for 7 months.
And the final question before we let you go is a two-parter, and I appreciate your time. I guess one, what's your relationship, I guess, across with both sides now? Do you watch a fair bit of sort of St Kilda and Carlton? Obviously, it sounds like the breakdown between your relationship with St Kilda wasn't great, but have you sort of come back around to the point where there's still a place for them in your heart alongside Carlton? And I guess the second part before we let you go, I know you played State of Origin in the early 90s. I think you would have been playing in a game in WA, the famous Ted Whitten stuck it right up game. I guess what that experience was like being a part of Ted Whitten's Victoria.
Yeah, I'll talk about the Victorian thing. That when he mentioned that was against South Australia, at Footy Park, and I didn't actually play that game. I was actually in the coach's box for that game. Mm-hmm. And Danny Frawley and I were in the coach's box. We didn't make the final cut, so they got us to sit in the coach's box, and Billy Goggin was the coach at the time. And Teddy was a fantastic character, and I knew Teddy because through my dad, who was a journalist, they had a relationship. But it was something that I loved doing anyway, representing the state and being involved with that, and that was the next level up from AFL footy or VFL footy back in those days. That you're playing against the best players in Australia, and it was a great experience. I played 3 games for Victoria, 2 games, and that game there that I sat in the coach's box, and that'll stick with me forever. That was a great experience for me. In regards to AFL footy, I don't really watch it much anymore. I've got both teams. I've got it in my heart. There's no things happen in footy across your career, and you take the goods with the bads. And St Kilda were fantastic when I was there, and they were fantastic to Bailey when Bailey was there. And there are things that happen across the journey. That it just that happens, and you deal with them. You don't think about it. You don't hold any grudges or anything like that. It's just part of what the actual the environment is, and the culture and whatever it is within AFL football. I don't watch AFL football at the moment because I don't think it's it's not that attractive to watch. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that the players that play today are really athletic and they're better skilled than we were as players, but I just don't think the game is as attractive to watch as it was when I was playing, and probably changed over the last 10 to 15 years. So I got two younger boys. One's 13, one's 10. My 13-year-old, he loves his footy. He wants to play AFL footy. So I guess my love of football is what's watching them and just being involved locally. So if they go on to do anything from that level, then I'll get back into it and be passionate about it again. But I don't really watch much AFL footy at the moment.
Well, to have had two major knee recos and to have played 230 games and won a flag and represented your state's a super effort. And we appreciate your contribution, not just you, but obviously the Rice family with the son representing the club as well. So appreciate your time and good luck with everything going forward.
Thanks, guys.
Dean Rice there. We wrap our season up this week against Fremantle at Hobart at 12:15 on Sunday. Fremantle will be playing for a spot in the 8. They will still be alive because Essendon will still be to play. That game will be after that. So we will play a desperate Fremantle. It's not going to be a genuine dead rubber, even though it is for us, unfortunately. So Max King already ruled out, which was always going to happen. They took the risk last week with the groin, and because he went down with that same circumstance, you're not going to play him. With nothing on the line, knowing what happened there. Jack Billings is also ruled out. He won't return this week, meaning that his season has finished, and now I'll watch this space on him. And Dara Joyce out with a concussion sustained in that tackle from Tom Hawkins last week. He's actually been okay for us. So that's unfortunate. Not that Fremantle have an abundance of tall forwards, although Taberner is in pretty good form. So we look to that. Highmore a chance to come back, Hunter Clark a chance to come back, and Connolly a chance to come back. Concussions for the latter two. Really, it's just a case of how we want to play it, really, whether it's Bytel, whether it's Alabakis, you play him as a second ruckman. I've got no idea if he's even fit or not, given the VFL's not playing, but he's not on the injury list to my knowledge. And it's a case of seeing what we can get out of those young guys. It's still clearly a winnable game. They're at our level. They've got more to play for than us, so that doesn't necessarily mean too much. But, H, what's your assessment of it? Fremantle did us what would have been a favour last week, but look, I think in the end, even if we had won both matches, we weren't getting in because I think Essendon will smack Collingwood around.
I think, we need to find 3 retirees to play him this week, don't we? That was the key to last time. So, it's just go down there, give the young guys a game, see what they can do. I mean, they're the sort of players that are going to want to have a game. They want to show what they've got. They're fighting for positions going into next season. So put the best team out there in the way of who wants a position next year, and see what that can give us. I mean, it's the best opportunity to try something different, try players in a different spot, and say, give it a go, see what you got, see how you go with it. There's virtually nothing to lose in that way. So put Cooper Sharman one out at full forward. Put I don't know, as you're saying, if Alabakis is fit, bring him in as the ruckman. Play Marshall as a centre half forward or something. So it's an opportunity to actually see something that we haven't seen this year. So Freo are a reasonable opponent, as you say, they're a similar sort of level. So it's that's the best way to look at it. It's an opportunity to lead into next season.
I 100% agree. I think this is the week where, whatever issues Jack Bytel has had throughout this year in terms of pushing his case for selection, you put that aside and say you're on the ball this week. Go and win the ball.
92% game time. Go.
You're playing. Make your case. Show us what you can do. Ryan Burns on the ball. No more kind of half forward flank wing. Ryan Burns, you're on the ball with Jack Bytel. Matty Allison, you're playing this week. You're going to play on the half forward flank. You're going to run up to the wing and be that, hard running kind of forward target. You run up to the wing, run up to half back and be a marking target, and then push forward, run hard again. Like you said, Alabakis, you're playing. This might be your chance to show what you've got. You might never get another chance, but if you come in and play a really good game against Sean Darcy, then maybe that's what keeps you on the list for another year, gets you another contract. whatever that looks like, we've seen the impact that Leo Connolly's had, cross half back coming in and showing a bit of spark. We've seen Cooper Sharman over the last month and what he can do and showcasing his talents when no one thought that was going to happen. Now's we have absolutely nothing to lose. It doesn't really matter if we get the 4 points, but you put out a team that's going to give them everything. And whether that's Alabakis, whether it's Matty Allison, whether it's Max Heath, who may be potentially fitter than Alabakis. If Alabakis hasn't been able to play, at least Max Heath has been able to play footy. And you say, look, you're probably not going to play next year, but you're the future with Rowan Marshall in ruck. You get a taste. We're going to play Rowan Marshall at full forward. You're going to play in the middle of the ground, and you're probably going to get towed up by Sean Darcy. But go and see how fast and how strong and how powerful AFL footy is, and the difference, and how hard you're going to have to work over the preseason and to win a spot at AFL level. Give the guys a run. We have nothing to lose, and the last thing you want to do is for some of these senior players, whether it's a Rowan Marshall or Max King, obviously who's not playing already, but you don't want those guys coming down with an ACL or a broken back like we've seen with Jake Carlisle, or with Rowan Marshall. If he breaks his foot again, Liz Frank issued a guy his size and he does that again, then why would you risk these guys in a real low pressure situation for us? Right now, we're looking to next year and onwards, because my feeling is that we're a real good shot for finals next year. We have going to have a better fixture, a fit list, not as many, veteran list cloggers. We're going to have a fair few changes to our playing list and our squad next year. That circumstances are going to look very different, and we've got to have one eye on finals footy next year.
Yeah, we had more than 1,000 games on the injury list every game of the season this year, which was the worst of every team in the comp. And look, that only extends so far. But I mean, Gresham in particular is a massive loss for us. So there's a lot of debate about how many genuinely elite midfielders we have. The answer is one in Jack Steele, but Gresham and Clark are a chance to be a couple more. Gresham's played, I think, 2 of our last 25, 30 games. And Hunter Clark's missed about 8 weeks this year as well. But they're 2 that we needed to have, obviously spend a lot of time in the middle with the rucks. And not counting Dylan Robertson, who retired, and not counting Ben Patton, who was unavailable for the entirety of the season, we had 41 players available over the course of the year and used 39 of them. The only 2 we didn't use were Allison and Alabakis from the start of the season. So I think Allison will probably get a game this week, so that'll tip us over to 40, which is quite remarkable that Alabakis could conceivably be the only fit senior listed player that didn't get a game over the course of the season. So it does put that into a little bit of perspective. But yeah, I kind of sort of see it the same way. I'd be tempted to maybe give another ruckman a run so that Marshall can play forward and give us that King-like structure that we would normally have, which would help Sharman and would help potentially Allison and would certainly help Membry. Because I don't want Membry anchored to the goal square. I think his roaming role's been good for us. So, yeah, it's a good chance, H, to sort of just play around with a few of those things and try to blood it. Because, yeah, I mean, we found a few things this year. I mean, Connolly and Burns look like they can play, and certainly Sharman looks like he can play. So just give him a bit of a look.
Yeah, we've actually unearthed a bit of gold when you look at it. As I say, we didn't expect to get anything from Sharman. We didn't expect to get a lot from Connolly, and he showed he's a good user of the ball, and it sort of what we have found in a time of need. You've sort of looked back and gone, none of them have been bad. There's been nothing come through and gone, they're not going to make it. Everyone that's come into the team, you sort of thought, hey, they've got a little bit.
Yeah, and we've seen resurgences from Webster and McKenzie and those guys as well that kind of nailed down spots. So
yeah,
I
McKenzie
mentioned Hanbury the other day. I
I
actually thought Hanbury played all right the other day. He was solid.
Yeah, yep.
Solid. So I mean that's not a future thing, but
certainly can see he hasn't lost his ability to get his hands on the ball. He played 60% of game time and had 18 touches or something.
He was probably in our best 6 or 7 in reality. Yeah.
For the time he was out,
yeah,
that's a fair return. You weren't expecting 30 touches and 2 goals from him.
No, but you always think you always think the eternal optimist. You're like, oh, what if he plays 16 games next year? And that's what you look for, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So if he plays 16 games next year, it's a massive upside.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that gives you consistency, and you're thinking, well, if he's playing 16 games, obviously we're travelling well, because if we could fall in a hole, he's not going to play anyway. It'd sort of be getting to the point of going, well, this isn't working. So, if he has played 16 games by the time finals come next year, you got to say we're probably sitting in a pretty good position.
The bloke we must get right for next year, not just right in terms of fitness, because fitness will be fine, but I know we'll touch more on that next week, but we have to sort Battle out. There's some murmurings that he's not all that happy, and I can understand why. He's not getting locked into positions and stuff like that. We've got to figure out where we want him to play. None of this swinging around everywhere. He had that breakout year in 2019 playing off half-back. He's looked all right when you played him as a leading forward. Just figure out what you want him to be, because he can be pretty important to us as a side, but we've got to get that right. Otherwise, we'll lose him and he'll play 150 games somewhere else.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I think Nick Caulfield's another one who's shown his ability, but has a really down year. And I think he's another really important one to the way that we line up, the way that we structure our kind of back six or back half of the ground. That, you get his head right and you get him in the game, that all of a sudden we look a lot better when we've got ball in hand, and his intercept abilities and reading the play and all that sort of stuff. That, the three guys, I think if you get the heads right and you get the bodies right, Josh Battle, Hunter Clark and Nick Caulfield make a huge difference to the way that we play the style of footy that we want to play.
Yeah,
spot on.
Battle's problem was he was a really bits and pieces player. He didn't have that position that he was in that position and someone else had to get him out of, or he was sort of like, oh, this player's out, we'll use you here.
Victim of circumstance.
Players don't really hold positions when that's what their role is. So he needed to find a way to break into a position and not being able to be removed from it, but that just hasn't happened. And I mean, your question is that position there, or is he always going to be a bits and pieces player?
Well, I wonder now, and again, sort of branching a little bit into that the sort of next week territory, but with Frawley, you would think retiring, with Robertson already retired, with Carlisle gone, we've got Wilkie, Howard, Highmore, Claverino, Joyce, etc., whether Battle can become that defender again. Whether we look at it and say, okay, well, maybe we'll go and get Talia or someone like that, but he's the depth player and it's your spot, Battle. I know you're not a monster to play fullback, but Howard plays fullback, Wilkie gets the second tall, and you and Highmore are your interceptors, and you can give a bit of rebound and that sort of thing, because Clark will go into the middle and just change things up a little bit. But then you got to balance that with Webster and with Patton coming back in. But they're good problems to have, but you just got to figure it out. I sort of feel that at the end of the day, his best football has probably been at halfback, but he has looked all right forward too. So
he's a natural forward, and he's a beautiful kick for goal. And in a year where we haven't had many of those, it's hard to kind of move him away from that type of forward position. But if he could become that third tall defender and really become kind of that, whether it's McGovern or whoever it is, that real kind of solid intercept mark, reads the play, intercept, rebound type play, then it gives the ability to push guys like Clark or Caulfield or whoever it is, Sinclair further forward, and to be able to impact in other ways than using them as intercept rebound players. And we know that those guys were they all came into the system as midfielders or as wingmen. So if we can release them into their more natural positions, then maybe Battle can hold down that third key tall spot.
Potentially, yeah. And you're right on Caulfield too. Like, he's another one that's sort of got to bounce back. But we'll pull all that apart next week. There's 1,000 different avenues to talk about list wise. It's going to be a fascinating discussion, that one. So we very much look forward to having it. But it'd be nice to take out Freo in Tassie, get that result this week, get a 10-win season, which reads certainly better, infinitely better than 9 and 13 for whatever reason. If you have a double-figure win season, it whatever reason feels slightly more redeemable. So we'll look ahead to that on Sunday, and a big thank you to Dean Rice for joining us, and we'll be back for a full list assessment next week.